There's only two moats: hard problems, doing hard things. We want to make it as cheap as possible in both time and money, saving you a ton of time to go and spin up these things and then only paying for what you actually use when you're going and doing that. We want you to spend as little time as possible on the kind of configuration, drudge work, et cetera, so that you can actually go out and build the thing you actually wanted to go out and do, right? Like, people don't start a business to go and learn about Ansible or Kubernetes or any of this other thing. But current generation of software, if you want to start a business that'll actually kind of like scale for you, you do have to go and learn these things, right? Unless you use, the tools that we were building so that you can actually spend all of the time working on the actual problem that you started your business to solve.
Welcome to The Peel. I'm your host, Turner Novak, founder of Banana Capital. Today's guest is Jake Cooper, founder of Railway.
We make all of that stuff that you would need to potentially retain somebody to go and manage those things. You can just do it yourself.
Jake has grown Railway to figures in revenue, and our conversation gets into how they solve the hardest problems in dev tools and the importance of backend infrastructure in AI native software.
In the age of AI, there's a very, very material risk of being out executed by your competitors because they are moving so quickly.
Railway has made a bunch of creative and bold product bets, like enabling users to create templates, earning a revenue share when other people use them, and building their own data centers and cloud service.
We want to be as quick as possible, and Racking Runs allows us to move even closer to that kind of like metal.
We talk about how Railway fully ramps new hires in 4 weeks.
Nobody joins a startup to be told what to do. They join a startup to work on hard problems.
Using Discord instead of Slack, what hypergrowth companies get wrong on org design.
It's really, really important to have operators be also managers.
And why you shouldn't always work on the weekend.
Horsepower gets you a lot of the way, but at a certain point, you need to refine your technique. And if you're working all the time, you don't really have a space to figure out where you essentially lost time.
A quick thank you to Angelo at Railway and Erica at Redpoint for helping brainstorm topics for Jake. A reminder, I publish new episodes of The Peel every week, exploring the world's greatest startup stories, just like this one. Before we talk to Jake, we have to talk about Ramp. If you're running a finance team, you know how much time gets wasted on expense management. Chasing receipts, categorizing transactions, waiting for expense reports, it adds up quickly. Ramp handles all of this automatically. Ramp is a corporate card and expense management platform that over 40,000 companies like Shopify, CBRE, and Stripe are using to streamline their financial operations. But here's what makes their corporate card different. Every transaction gets automatically categorized and matched to receipts. No more wondering what that $47 charge was for 3 weeks later. You can set spending controls, get real-time alerts, and even block certain merchant categories. It's like having a finance team member embedded in every purchase. That's pretty cool. The platform also integrates with your accounting system and ERP, so everything flows through without manual data entry. It's like having a finance team member embedded in every purchase. The platform integrates with your accounting system and ERP, so everything flows through without any manual data entry. That's pretty cool. Whether you're issuing cards to a few employees or managing spend across departments, Ramp gives you visibility and control without the paperwork. Stop chasing receipts. Check out ramp.com/thepeel. Get $250 and see what a corporate card can actually do for you. Time is money. Save both with Ramp. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I think this will be fun. Really quick, for people who don't know, I've heard Railway described as solving the hardest problem in dev tools. What is that actually? And then what is Railway?
Yeah, so I think it's like the intersection of a lot of hard problems. And so that's what makes it quite difficult. So we are really easy to use cloud platform. You kind of just go to dev.new or railway.com. You start almost like kind of spewing out the things that you want. You say, give me Postgres, deploy my GitHub repository, give me a starter Python app, start writing some code, et cetera. And we, as the underlying kind of infrastructure cloud provider, will automatically go in and kind of provision those resources for you. So we solve a lot of really, really hard problems in terms of delivering user experience to users. When people think about like cloud infrastructure, they think of like servers and like Kubernetes and like, YAML and all these other like complicated kind of things. And we try and abstract a lot of those things into really, really easy to use infrastructure by starting on a lot of the user experience stuff and ending all the way at building our own data centers to power a lot of that experience. So there's a lot of hard problems in between, whether they're user experience problems, infrastructure problems, configuration management problems, versioning, deployment, rollouts, kind of stuff like that, live infrastructure.
So pre-Railway, what was I doing to do all this stuff? Like, what did the world kind of look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it runs on things like Terraform. So you'll go and basically write your infrastructure as code. And then you'll be able to kind of like roll it out and apply it, right? Which requires you to know every knob, bell, whistle, config, et cetera. So you'll pull in kind of a definition. You'll go and set the properties you want to go in and do. Usually you end up doing this actually after you've kind of explored some of the really, really complicated cloud dashboards that Google or Amazon or whatever have. You have to figure out how to like version your config when you work on teams and go and like roll out these kind of services. There's a little bit of kind of like knowledge or stuff you have to kind of like know as you're going to roll them out. So like, how do you do things like blue-green deployments, which is, I will spin up a new version of the service. I'll let it kind of like warm up, and then I will like seamlessly cut the traffic so that whenever you deploy new versions of your code, the thing doesn't go down, right? So those are things that you have to kind of know the underlying bells, stops, whistles, et cetera. And for us, the alternative is you just give us your GitHub repository. We will go and roll it out for you, and then we will go and automatically manage things like that and slowly expose all of those nods, bells, and whistles instead of you having to kind of like swallow the whole thing at once,
So for someone who's maybe confused with a lot of the technical terminology that you just said, the idea is that you make it super simple to do a lot of these more complicated, disparate, traditionally separate, and harder to kind of orchestrate all together infrastructure things, and you kind of tie it into one easy to use platform.
Yep, exactly, right? We make all of that stuff that you would need to potentially retain somebody to go and manage those things. You can just do it yourself by saying, hey, I've got this thing that I had working locally on my machine. I wrote a little web server. It returns, my gym sessions or my to-do list or anything else like that. I'm going to go and deploy it, right? And you can deploy databases, you can deploy functions, you can deploy pretty much anything, right? And we make it trivial to not just deploy simple stuff, but everything under the hood so that you can scale to infinity.
Why'd you call it Railway?
There's a couple like different reasons for that. I really like the kind of like infrastructure, almost like monopoly utilities thing, because Railway is basically a utilities company for the modern web. We want to make it so that you can spin up everything super trivially. You just only pay for what you use. And it's just a thing that kind of like slides into the background, right? It doesn't need to be crazy or insane or anything else like that. It just kind of works, right? And so trains are really, really solid from an infrastructure perspective, really easy to like get around, et cetera. And so, yeah, that was a good one. But there's also, kind of a nod to like Ruby on Rails or anything else like that in there. So there's a couple like things.
Interesting. I didn't even think of that one. That makes sense. And you said something about cheaper to you. So what's the value prop? Is it that you're saving me time? Is it I'm cutting costs by using Railway? Like, why would I use it?
Yeah. So we want to make it as cheap as possible in both time and money, right? So saving you a ton of time to go and spin up these things and then only paying for what you actually use when you're going and doing that, right? We want you to spend as little time as possible on the kind of configuration, drudge work, et cetera, so that you can actually go out and build the thing you actually wanted to go out and do, right? Like we won't start a business to go and learn about Ansible or Kubernetes or any of this other thing, but current generation of software, if you want to start a business that'll actually kind of like scale for you, you do have to go and learn these things, right? Unless you use, the tools that we were building so that you can actually spend all of the time working on the actual problem that you started your business to solve.
So when you were starting this, what was kind of order of operations? Like, what do you start with? Because I think when I think like all the things you kind of do are sort of separate companies and separate products. So you sort of have to build all those different things. Like, how did you get this initially off the ground? Was like certain things you started with? Like, what was kind of the process of doing that?
Yeah. So I started with the thing that I thought would be the hardest, if that makes sense. So I was like, cool, if we can actually solve this, then we have a really, really good shot at solving all of the other stuff. Turns out I was really dumb in a lot of hard things. So what I thought was hard was actually, it's still hard.
It was like the easiest.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the easiest, right? But it was definitely somewhere in the middle. Maybe on the 75 percentile. But
so if you go back, would you do a different thing first?
I don't think so. I'm a big believer in the butterfly effect. I think things are going well, so I wouldn't mess with anything in general. So we were kind of, the thing that I started with was like databases, right? And so databases are actually pretty hard. Like stable storage ends up being actually quite difficult on the almost like iceberg of like complicated infrastructure things, right? Because, people have data in their databases, and if you lose the data in your database, then you have a terrible time or whatever, right? So I started with that because I was trying to spin up a bunch of different side projects, and every single time I was like, oh, I want a new side project or something like that. I'd have to like wait essentially and like go and spin up something in the AWS dashboard and then configure, like any sort of like firewall rules or anything else like that to like get this working. So I was like, oh man, there's got to be a better way, right? So I started with like a really crappy script that just ran on a box. I could call the endpoint and it would spin up a database. And then I just kept using that. And then as I was kind of iterating through different ideas for like stuff I wanted to work on, I just kept expanding this kind of like script, and people were like, oh, this is super cool. Like, I kind of spin up like not just Postgres. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Right. And so then they started using it. And then I was like, okay, well, like, I'll just like launch it on Twitter or whatever, and like people can use it. So pushed it out, and then people thought it was super cool. And then I like basically asked, I was like, okay, well, like if I want to work on this thing, this is like where I think that I'm going to go in general. Who's working on this? Right. So I went around to a lot of different people. I went around to like Jason Warner, who was the CTO of like GitHub at the time, and I was working on Poolside. I was like, hey, Jason, like, were y'all working on this? And he was like, yeah, like, some things got moved around as we like, absorbed into, from GitHub to Microsoft. But this is super cool. Like, we're not actually actively working on this. I think it's awesome. You want to take an angel check, right? And so I went around to a bunch of different people. And at the end of it, I had like no job offers, but like a bunch of commits for an angel check. So I was like, okay, well, like let's see where this goes.
So you were actually trying to get a job sort of in this process
too? Yeah, because I wanted to work on this thing, right? And I was like, okay, well, like I know I'll start a company at some point in general, but just tell me where I can work on the cool problem, and I'll just work on the cool problem.
So you wanted to join a company and build this?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to build this. I didn't really care, right? In general, I was like, okay, well, this seems good. Seems like a thing that is pretty evident. People are going to want it, etc. Somebody must be building this, right? And then went around, couldn't find anybody who's like actually working on it from the angle that I wanted to. So I was just like, okay, well, like let's just run with it.
Because you kind of think like, if it's all these different features that sort of already exist in all these different places, like shouldn't someone have started to expand what they did and start to kind of do the real, like your thesis of like someone else should do this? Yeah. Did you know why it didn't already exist?
I think it was like kind of a good enough thing, if that makes sense, right? Like it has all the things you need, like integrated, right? Like it is the everything store, right? And I don't think people were building software at the rate that they are right now. And I think especially with the AI stuff, it's accelerated a lot of those things. And so we're seeing like massive uptick in terms of people who are using and starting to use on Railway. Like we've like 5x our top of funnel in the last like 6 months. So like tons and tons of people are signing up because the rate of iteration of software is growing so quickly. And now those old primitives like really aren't keeping up, right? If somebody wants to kind of like vibe code a, some sort of thing, and then they slam into Ansible, Kubernetes, et cetera, they're just gonna be like, what do I do, right? Like, and like there's, I don't know if you've seen it, but like there's people on the like some subreddit being like, hey, like how do I not lose my like progress for like the last 6 months? Like cursor just erase it, and it's like, oh my god, these people like they don't know Git, like they don't know Git or like versioning or any of the underlying things, right? So there's this whole kind of oasis or like ocean of people that are like coming to go and build software, whether they are people who are already software engineers moving a lot quicker, or new software engineers trying to build something. And they're always looking for like something way quicker, right? Because the iteration loop has gotten so much tighter with a lot of the like AI tooling, right?
So if you're like a backend pro, you're like the Guilfoyle in Silicon Valley, like you might say like Rail, like I don't need that, like I can build all this. Yep. But that's probably like a pretty small percentage of people. Like the average person starting a company, like I feel like most people are not back-end experts.
Yeah. So the long tail of like people who would not be suited for Railway is like diminishing by the day, basically, because we can deploy anything now, right? Actually, anything asterisk. We can't deploy GPU infrastructure just yet. But like that is kind of like dwindling, right? And so too is the market growing of people who are just saying, I just want to move a lot quicker, right? And so as our capability kind of gets significantly better and better and better, and those people wanting to deploy faster and faster and faster, we're reaching this kind of inflection point where most people are actually almost capitulating out of that like older mechanism of like building software and moving into the realm of the thing that we have built, right? So that's super cool, because I think for a long while we're building a thing and, we go and like pitch it to like VCs and they'd be like, well, like, what problem is it solving? It's like, well, software infrastructure sucks, right? And you're like, yeah, but like, tell me more about this thing, right? And now it's people want to move significantly quicker. And in the age of AI, there's almost like a very, very material risk of like being out executed by your competitors because they are moving so quickly. And if you don't have the tooling or infrastructure to move at that pace, you're going to get left behind, right? So now we're in kind of a more interesting spot where it's like, oh, people are moving because it is simultaneously cheaper and faster to use the tools that we've built.
And it seems like probably at first getting a big customer, like a bigger enterprise or mid-market business switch over may have been hard. Like it was just like you kind of got to get somebody starting the company to start building on it. But then it's like a little bit you're seeing people actually switch and bring their whole like re-architect their entire system on top of Railway?
Yeah. So the nice thing is that we support all existing open source primitives, right? And so you can actually just go and import things from existing infrastructure that you have, right? You have Docker files, that's fine. You have your code base, we can go and automatically go in and detect these things, et cetera. We can import just various different kind of configuration files to kind of automatically import you, right? So you don't have to do too much of that in general. So bigger companies, then the benefit actually in this is that nobody wholesale cuts their infrastructure. They just they don't do it.
So what does that mean?
Like nobody's just going to basically show up and say, well, I spend $2 million a month on AWS and I want to move all of it over here next week, right? They just don't do it.
So it's just let's just try it. Let's just the intern set this up, or one team used for this was
somebody, the way that it usually happens is somebody either hears about us or already starts bringing it inside of the organization for some sort of either Tiger Team project or thing that they were wanting to spin up internally. And so they ran into essentially this platform team edge of this team potentially internally that, manages all of this tooling. They've exposed them in various different ways that ends up being cumbersome. And that's through no fault of the platform tooling. That's actually the underlying infrastructure. The infrastructure that they are trying to abstract is very, very difficult. And in my opinion is almost unabstractable. It is at its most baseline form, the least complicated you could make that infrastructure. So any attempt to kind of move it around actually just ends up pushing the complexity around, right? So these teams who would end up otherwise spinning up things on that infrastructure can't, right? So they're looking for a new way to kind of move things around. So they'll spin up something on Railway just to kind of start it and then go from there, right? And so that's what usually happens. Somebody spins it up, it grows inside a little bit in the organization, and then at some point, the OPSEC antibodies of the organization basically say oh, what is this tool? It's not on an approved list or anything else like that. But that gets us into a sales conversation with the people at the company because there's already things running on it because it was so easy to go and spin up anything on it, right?
So then going back to when you were first kind of going through this process of it's sort of a side project, it's kind of became a company. You got a lot of really impressive people to kind of invest early on. Did they invest before you had a fully baked product and vision and customer signed up, or was it kind of parallel path that? How did that kind of play out?
So yeah, they definitely invested. The demo I gave them was one Postgres instance with a shared user. So if anybody actually just got into it and ran anything on it, they could just nuke the entire database. So it was really, really poorly fleshed out in general. So it was just the inklings, just of a bit of that almost aha moment of, oh, I can do this thing and here's how I do it in the future. And that was kind of the demo that we went forward with. And as for how we found them, I think it was X or stuff like that. I was just doing the build in public thing, sharing, et cetera. And then I said, oh, if I were to actually go in and raise money for this thing, who should I talk to in general, right?
So is your approach hey, Turner, I'm raising money, please invest? What was your approach?
It was more I am building this interesting thing. Here's this interesting thing. Who would be interested in giving money to me to build this interesting thing, right? And then I had a bunch of people Tom Preston Warner, who's really, really lovely. He raised his hand in the comment. I was oh, we should just chat, right? I'm oh my God, I love Twitter or X or whatever, right? It's just this bridge that brings a ton of people together, right? So it was a lot of that, honestly, of people just kind of putting up their hand or me seeking them out from that job offer perspective of those two things. And then at the end, we had about $500,000 worth of angel commits. And then it kind of just all came together in that and then started doing it.
So would you recommend approaching it more like that? When you were getting that first round, we need $1 million, whatever the number is to get off the ground, less of a, hey, I need money. You're talking to people in the context of I'm fundraising, please invest. Treat it more of a kind of looking for advice, looking for how to unlock, maybe meeting new people. You approach it more that way. Do you that's generally the approach that you took, it seems like?
Yeah. So I think this is a philosophy that I have just generally. It's almost you should delay, and then just go all in, right? It's almost you want to wait until you're really, really confident, and then, you just be really, really confident and almost turn on a dime, right? So as an example, wasn't super into any of the AI kind of stuff as early as basically this, I think January basically is when I started kind of just really digging into it. And then I saw it and I was oh, this is really, really cool and it will work. And I see the way that it'll work. And I see the way this is going to break in general for a lot of stuff, but at least it's solid enough ground to build basis on, right? So in the same vein, I think that you should continue to work on your project and make sure that it's kind of going to be something that you're actually going to want to spend like worst case scenario 3 to 5 years on, best case scenario like 10 to 15 years on or whatever, right? Because that's how long it is, right? Like it's a long journey to be able to like go in and build something, et cetera, right? And once you raise money, like you're essentially committing to run that gambit, right? You are committing to deploy the capital, run after the strategy, go and build the team, et cetera.
Raise more capital, increase the team,
products. Right? It's once you step on the treadmill, you are on the treadmill, right? And you should know that you're going to continue to go and do that, and that's when your kind of like marathon starts in general, right? And there are, I think, a lot of candidly just like angels out there who are like, I know there's that whole meme of like VCs want to be helpful, right? But angels, I think, genuinely like some of them feel like they got lucky with a lot of their hard work. And, obviously they threw in a lot of hard work to it, but they now have, money in spades that they want to actually like go and almost like pay it forward. Right. So they're potentially looking to like say, okay, there's, these people who are really, really hungry, just as I was, et cetera, ready to like go on the journey. How can I potentially go in and help them? Right. And we've had, the fortune of working with those people who, just want to pay it forward. Right. So that's awesome.
When you mentioned you were sort of resisting AI, like you're like, I don't know, but then it was suddenly like a flip switch. So what's been going since ChatGPT launch? What's been your evolution of thought process on everything AI?
Yeah. So my evolution of thought process was like, that's just funny because my roommate's been at OpenAI for like the last 7 years. So I'm just sitting here being like, yeah, it's cool, man, or whatever, right? And then he's like,
nonprofit, like, come on.
Yeah, it's fine, right? We go to the sauna like every month, and there's, like, how's it working? Oh, okay, cool, right? Like, I wonder when that thing will like calm down or whatever. And then at some point, it was basically just like, oh, I started using it for a bunch of different things. I think I honestly was probably holding it wrong, if that makes sense, right?
Like you were not using it appropriately, or you like didn't know how to take advantage.
Yes,
okay.
Didn't know.
Like, you're one of those people when we see those threads, like 99% of people are using ChatGPT wrong.
Yes,
you remember those? This was like a long time ago, so you didn't read those threads, obviously.
No. Oh, dude, if I'd be so powerful if I could read anything, like it's just I miss things like that, right? So yeah, it was one of those things where I think simultaneously it crossed two bridges in my mind. It got sufficiently good where I could outsource small pieces of work or anything else like that. And I got a good enough flow on it where, and this is still my flow to this day, which is I ask it to do something. I am very, very concrete about it. I already know how to solve the problem. I don't ask AI to do that like I don't know how to go in and do. I only ask it to do things that I already know how to go in and do so that I can gut check it, et cetera. Right. So for me, it was a lot of like, I tried to ask it to like solve things and like various different levels of success. And I would also just end up with like a ton of stuff. Right. So a lot of the interesting stuff that's happening right now in my mind is actually, people talk a lot about the greenfield stuff, right? Like I can go from nothing to to-do list app or whatever, right? I actually find that like not that interesting because I actually want to set up the initial scaffolding because I want to know how it works in general. And then I want to ask AI to fill out something way quicker than I would, right? And so like as a very reductive example, I would be like, parallelize this for loop, right? For me, like this is blocking. Like I need you to actually just like parallelize this. I already know how that's going to work in general, right? But I can save a ton of time of just like, how would I like write the keystrokes or whatever, right? And so I've been using it to like various degrees on that where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to write down, an RFC on how to do this database migration. We're going to move sessions from Postgres to Redis. This is how it's going to work, right? And then I just hand it to Claude or Cursor or whatever. And I say, do the first step. That's our first pull request. Come back to me, et cetera. Very, very deliberate, right? So it's almost that like outsourcing to a junior engineer that is a bit more concrete kind of type person, right?
So you just said junior engineer. I feel like before it was like outsourcing to an intern or like a shitty intern.
Yes.
But I feel like that's kind of how I initially, when all these people explaining what they're using ChatGPT for, and I would try it and I would be like, it's kind of like when you like the intern that you kind of hope doesn't get a return offer and like leaves and like they aren't very good. It's like, that's kind of my relationship where it was like, it wasn't a good product, but you could see that it was getting better. And I feel like probably to your point, within the past 6 months, 9 months, for the things I kind of use from, like, it was actually pretty good. Like it's actually usable. Or like this is interesting in like a work product. I think like it's always been like better Google. Like that's always kind of been there and like it worked for that or whatever. Yeah, I feel like in the last probably like since very early this year, late last year, I've noticed the same thing where it's like you can actually rely on it.
Yep, it's good. It's like like a bionicle arm that once in a while just malfunctions, but it malfunctions in ways where you can be like, oh, okay, like stop, like just don't do that, right? So the way that I've taken to it is basically saying, can you 1 or 2 shot this task? And if you fall off the rails too quickly, I'm just going to bail and just like do this myself. I do that too, right? And so like, that's the utility that I actually found like really, really good for it, because it's like, it's almost a separation of concerns, right? Like when I try and like work with it to solve a hard problem, it's like me and Claude are sharing one brain cell, and it's like really not a great time. And we're both like, right? So
Like you're trying to figure it out together.
yeah, we're trying to figure it out together.
You're two blind people like wandering through the dark,
Moving
like,
around where you're just like, okay, right? And so that I haven't found like, great success on it. But, separation of concerns, the like, splitting of the like, I think it's a bicameral mind of again, where you basically say, do this for me. Okay, I'll do that for you, right? Like that is actually kind of, work quite well, right? So yeah.
So I know you're really big on automating things and like just getting leverage and automate. Like, do you use AI for that? Are there like other ways to automate things? Like how should somebody think about trying to do that, getting more leverage from automation?
One thing that I say often is grit, process, repeat. So don't try and automate things right off the bat, right? There's that like very famous XKCD, which is like you automate like a very small task that happens very infrequently, but it takes you an entire week to go in and do. It's like, well, that's a waste of time, right? Like you're not going to get the return on investment there, right? So when we talk about leverage, I'm looking for opportunities that I can put in a bit and get a lot out of it, right? And so running that calculus on every single thing that you can actually go in and do, that helps us kind of like quantify leverage, right? So I think there's a lot of different spots. And I think like, the reason people really, really like AI is because you put in a little and you get out a lot, right? And so this is kind of your equation, regardless of whether you're using AI to go and do this thing, right? Like put in a little, get a lot, right?
Have there been any examples where like personally or internally that you guys have gotten the most leverage?
The one that I reach for often, and people are like, "Oh, you did this? This is nuts." Is we built our own support tooling.
Okay, there's a couple startups that do that.
There are a couple startups that do that.
There's also, when you look at like the whole meme of like AI is gonna replace all software. That's a common example. Like we built our own support system.
Yes, exactly, right. So we built our own support system, and it's awesome. I was using it the other day, and like it's a bit of a mess internally this last quarter, because we've been like pushing a ton on like growth, and like also like turning off a bunch of our like Google Cloud machines to move to our own like bare metal infrastructure. So it's been like a total zoo from just like people have questions, stuff like that, right? And we built this system that's like, I feel like I'm like basically playing like StarCraft, or like it's like high APM like gaming, where I'm just like in there, just like
in the support system.
And it's genuinely, it's a deeply wonderful experience where you're just like tearing through this thing, right? And you're just like, it's this. I've got like macros for like common questions. I've got like a little AI prompt on the side that like gives me context on like the thread. And all of this is like stuff that we built internally, right? And so like this is a thing where, we have 1 million users. We have 3 support people, right? And we all rotate like kind of like throughout the queue, but we build a system so that we can actually go and operate and like figure out how quickly can we get back to these users with the level of quality that we really, really need, right? Because for a time we were actually like really, really bad at support. Like people would give us tickets and it would take like 5 or 6 days to like respond on some of these things. It was awful, right? And we looked at this thing, we're like, damn, this is horrible. Totally understand where customers are coming from, et cetera. I was like, how do we get to 24-hour SLA on everything, right? And then like lower the 24 hours on like enterprise and anything else like that, right? So we built all of the tooling around that, right? Some of that is AI. Some of that is like building these things ourselves. Some of it is like, just doing like solving hard problems of like design and engineering so that you can actually gain all the context you need. Because Railway is interesting because since you can deploy anything, people ask a lot of questions about a lot of disparate things, right? And so trying to figure out ways that you can kind of like pool together knowledge or like start putting people together in the community, right? Like we can't answer every single Python question, right? Like it's just untenable, right? So how do we give these people like topics, or, we have these things called bounties in the community now where it's like, oh, cool. If you're having like throughput issues on Python or anything else like that, we can actually go and kick it to kind of like a queue of people in the community who are going around and solving these bounty questions. They get paid every single time they go and solve any of these problems. And we also go and push those people together. So it's like, oh, that person is like an expert on Python, right? So the Python questions are actually getting routed specifically to that person, and they can go and help and solve those things, right?
So is there like a internal forum or something somewhere, or okay?
Yep. We're like, maybe a contrarian take that we have is like forums, unfortunately, like have come the way of the dinosaur, and everything's been kind of like pulled into like Discord communities. So there's not a ton of stuff that's indexed, right? So we'd actually went out and build a ton of tooling around like indexing these threads, routing users together, pulling any telemetry and information from actually any of the railway projects to say, oh, this person is deploying Python and they've recently kind of done these things, etc. These are all hints of like how we could actually potentially solve the problem for them.
You build like a lot of custom stuff, it sounds like, but it's not core to the actual railway product. Like how have you rationalized, let's build this cool, interesting, unique thing versus let's just buy one of the AI customer support, or like is there forum software out there? Like how did you decide on what to do there?
So I guess for us, it was what are like other people bad at almost. That's like an arm for us basically, right? And
So what are your competitors bad at?
I wouldn't say competitors necessarily, but almost like what is the industry as a whole bad at, right? Like software infrastructure as an industry, right? Like
Bad at customer support?
I don't think they're very good at customer support. I don't think they're very good at, developer experience, etc. So ease of use, all of those other things. And I don't think they're good at speed, right? So we've chosen to invest really, really deeply in all three of those and have them all kind of like essentially feed into each other, right? So our customer support experience is a product experience that we design. We work in it in-house. Our designers work on it and our engineers work on it. Everybody works on it because it's part of the product, right? So that's kind of tied in there and it's fast, right? Like you should be impressed with the level of support that you get and you should be impressed with the product. And now we routinely have people being, what is this piece of software? Like, how did you get, like, is this open source? And we're like, no, we built this, sorry.
Would you ever open source it or sell it?
Well,
or
what we'd like to do at some point is actually bring more, we're having conversations with companies to bring them onto the platform as like almost a discussion space. Because you see a lot of these things where people are like, how do I get the voice of my community? How do I go and do all of this other stuff, right? What we can do, because we have all of the telemetry, we can figure out, let's say you publish a new version of your software. You go and send it to the community. Now you have issues, etc. We can take all of the stack traces, anonymize them, and go and send them back to you and say, hey, listen, on this version of Redis or on this version of whatever, you introduced a bug on this line. You should go and fix it. And it's now affecting these 10,000 people. Here's a funnel right to these 10,000 people if you want to talk with them and figure out like actually how to like solve, reproduce, etc. These things, right? So those are things that like, I don't know if we would actually like sell the software outright, but we want to basically make sure that it's not just a kind of like cost center, but actually like a revenue generation center. And it is because we do an open source kickback program. So if you host anything on Railway and you go and build the template for it, you get 25% of any of the revenue that you go in that people get when or that we get when people go and deploy that piece of software.
Oh, interesting. So it's almost like the Notion template type strategy for infrastructure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Or the Figma plugins or anything else like that.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And then like, so we talked about like super like complex, complicated product. You started with just databases. Like, how did you think about expanding over time? Like, any key product decisions that you feel like you've made?
It's a lot of the same thing that I mentioned previously, which is like, no, fuck yes, let's do it, right? So listening to the users, not necessarily saying we're going to ship everything, right? Because we don't want to make like software nachos. We want to make like actually a really, really solid product.
What's a software nacho?
Well, it's like everything in the sun. You're just adding everything to it. Right?
Oh, okay.
It's from like The Bear, right? Like when there's a chef that's basically
The restaurant show.
Yeah, right. Where it's like he's working a fine dining thing, and the chef is basically like, you made nachos, right? This is like not a fine dining experience, right? So we want to make something that's a very, very like, like concrete and deliberate, and it is this thing, right? So that's kind of what we want to go and do from that perspective. Right?
Was there a point when you felt like things were really starting to work? Like customer, like there's like almost like a tipping point in the business model. It's implementing almost like finding PMF. It was like a certain thing where it's like, holy shit, I think Railway is like a thing. Like this is going to be like a pretty big, like it's really working.
Yeah, I would say honestly, it's in the last 6 months where it's like, we had a conversation with the team where I was basically like, the oil rig is set up like we can run this thing straight upward, right? We just make it faster for people to build and deploy software. We make the experience better. We go and push towards this vision that we have of a unified new way to kind of like build software. This can definitely work, right? And we're seeing it now. We're seeing it with the inflection point of so many new people kind of like coming onto the platform and trying to build and deploy something, right? And then running to edges of the platform that we're like, oh man, I guess we got to fix that, right? But it's just so many like new people just doing this, right? Where it's starting to, really kind of like take off in my mind, right? So it's the closest to product market fit I've ever felt. But it only keeps getting crazier, right? So I'd say it's like it just keeps going.
One thing you mentioned, you built your own data centers.
Yes.
This is a Railway metal t-shirt. It's like metal and it spells Railway.
Metal?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that's the answer to this question, and maybe it's like one of a couple answers to this question, but what do you feel have been some of the more bold product decisions that you've made over the past couple of years?
I would say Metal is really like one of them. Making one-click infrastructure and templates is another one that like is paying off. We have like people in the community making like 6 figures off of these templates, right? So they're like actually getting like,
Okay, so what is this? Like a backend template? Like if I want to do this, I'm saying like, holy shit, I can make 6 figures a year making railway templates. Like what am I making?
yeah. So, it's software that people want to go in and deploy, right? So whether
it's like a system design?
kind of, yeah, right. So if you're saying, hey, I want to start a software project and, I write Python and I want Stripe and, it's kind of like these boilerplate things that people have like gone and built, right? Or it could be like packaged versions of software that requires a little bit of kind of like almost like DevOps handholding to go in and spin up and scale. So like we provide the tooling for it. You kind of consume this package in a way that you are none the wiser of how it should scale. And then the person kind of like maintaining it actually goes and figures out how this thing should scale over time, right? Self-hosted ClickHost or like N8N or like Plausible or any of those other things, right? And so it can start with some community version of the thing being hosted, and then it can kind of move towards like a first-party version of, Redis or ClickHost or whatever, like hosting their self-hosted distribution on Railway, right?
So if I'm using someone's template and they make a change to the template, does it change my infrastructure setup?
No. So you get a notification that there's a new version of it, right? And so you can go and consume that, right? You can go and read about the changes. You can go and see all of those things in there, right?
So I want to like accept their change of like they figured out a way to actually speed something up by changing.
So it's like
the connector.
25% faster on workloads for like asynchronous writes or something like that, right? And then you're saying, oh, okay, cool. I've had those issues in general, right? So instead of this being a thing where GitHub is like, through no fault of their own, like a series of broken pointers. You're basically saying, okay, well, how do I go and get the new version of that software? How do I go and update? Is it like a Helm chart? Is it like something else like as a new Docker version or something? Figure out where they host the change log or anything else like that. It's like we put all of those things together so you can kind of like riffle through this like version of software and then get the latest version of it and then also pin it so that, you go and downstream push a version of this and then now it breaks everybody's apps or anything else like that,
Like versioning control for infrastructure, sort of.
Yeah. And so this is the point of the earlier problem. Like we're solving a lot of problems of like, how do you not just like deploy your software, but like, how do you evolve it over time, right? Like, how do you iterate on it in a safe way, right? Like actually at large companies, most of the software outages, it's not at part of like a software error, like you shipped a bug or anything. Like those big outages that happen like Facebook, Cloudflare, like whatever, that's a config based outage. Like it's actually a property that they were trying to go and roll out when they were upgrading system.
And just something got fucked up during the upgrade
right?
process.
Because the peek under the hood and like how the sausage is made is essentially, there's a version of a piece of software and then there's an engineer whose job is it to like version and update that piece of software, right? And how that happens can range from one click, really easy to like consume, to I am doing basically like open heart surgery on this like piece of software to get it from like version N to version N plus 1. And we automate the entire life cycle of that.
Interesting. And then you also built your own data centers.
Yeah.
What was the thinking on that? Like, do you have a cloud service that you're offering to people? Like, can you just kind of explain this whole concept?
Yeah. So the thinking behind it is that we can actually do a lot of really, really cool stuff and build a better experience because we have our own hardware, right? Like we are moving from the realm of milliseconds down to like microseconds, right? That's like some sort of experience that we can actually make better. It's a portion that we can make faster, right? Like we can push the edge of that experience because we're not actually beholden to, operating through the primitives that the cloud providers offer, which they're solid, but at a certain point, those things end up falling flat from both ability to drive the experience and also, kind of outcomes that you'll have at scale, right? So
are people deploying on the Railway cloud now?
Yeah, so it's essentially like a cloud that you can go in and deploy on, right? So yeah, the reason to go and do that is to drag the product experience forward, right? And do things that other people possibly can't.
So what's an example of something that they wouldn't be able to do?
Well, so like on AWS or GCP or anything else like that, we can spin up workloads. It'll take like a few seconds or anything else like that. Like we can get into millisecond like deploy times now, right? Because we have a lot of our own infrastructure, and it may be possible to like go in and push those things out. And Ian's done a lot of like really, really cool work on just like spinning stuff up, but it ends up being on the realm of like a second-ish, right? And for something to be imperceptible from a user's experience perspective, you're looking to try and be in the like 100 millisecond range, right? So we want to be as quick as possible, and racking our own services allows us to move even closer to that kind of like metal of moving really, really quickly. It also allows us to offer a significantly reduced price to our users because we are running our own infrastructure, and because we built our own orchestrator, and because we've done essentially all of the hard work of, going and doing these peering relationships. So we pay for network at a metered rate instead of like a per gigabyte rate. So that allows us to drop that price significantly, which is super cool in a lot of the AI workloads because they're pretty data intensive.
Yeah, that's fair. And you wrote a post a couple years ago. I think it was called The Inward Draw of Capitalism. Did I say that right?
Yeah. That's a deep cut.
Is this sort of related to this concept?
Sort of, in the sense that I think there's only two moats: hard problems, doing hard things.
Or are they not related?
No, so they're like related, like at the edge, basically, right? So the point of that post was that it's easier to make basically like money with money than it is to make progress with money, right? And because we moved off the gold standard to actually a system where we're like moving money around, right? And that results essentially in people, doing jobs like being a day trader or, a banker or like a Twitch streamer, right? Like moving those things. And there's nothing wrong with that in general. It's just that we've made a lot of the kind of like exterior a lot more difficult to do, right? And so if I want to go and get a loan and like build a factory or anything else, like this is before A16Z and the whole like,
yeah, it's easy now. Just raise 50 million from A16Z and build a couple factories.
Yeah, right. So maybe I was like ahead of something or whatever, but like if you want to go and do that, you have to go through like regulatory burden. You have to like find construction workers. You have to go and do all of these other things, right? There's a lot easier ways to make money, right? But that whole point was that we're losing a lot of the like actual like fringes of society that allow us to kind of like push towards progress and like actually building things, right? And so another reason, and like, we're not out here using investor money to like fulfill this like philosophical like burden or whatever, right? But we believe that there is a strong arb in terms of doing complicated or difficult things that are almost becoming like a lost art, right? Like if you think of the people who are like racking and building data centers, right? You've like three people: AWS, GCP, Azure, right? Like those are the kinds of big people that kind of come to mind, right? And so over time, you're getting less and less and less of these people who have these esoteric skills. And, you can extend that to kernel knowledge, right? Like you have, people who are working on the like Linux kernel maintainer list, right? Like, they're having difficulties getting maintainers to like have this knowledge and work on this thing. There's a core part of like literally everything that we run on every piece of software. It's every single thing, right? And that thing is such esoteric knowledge, and they're having issues pulling in maintainers and people who are going to like go in and push this thing forward, right? Like it's crazy that knowledge is kind of like getting more sparse over time, right?
So you've made a lot of like pretty bold bets. Are there any other big ones that you've made, and maybe any that didn't go well or didn't work, or anywhere you got a lot of pushback from investors or people on the team? They're like, Jake, this isn't going to work. Don't do this.
What are some bad ideas that we did? I mean, we spent like $1 million on a domain, which I think was actually good, where it works well.
Just the railway.com,
the railway.com domain, right?
Who owned that before?
Some guy in the flyover state, so I think it was funny. I like looked at his LinkedIn, and like he was working at some sort of company for a while, and then I think he recently retired. So I don't know if they're correlated or whatever.
You bought the domain. You paid for this guy's retirement.
Yeah, who knows? Or his college fund or something. So that was good. The metal data centers was solid. We've done a lot of like experimental stuff in terms of like how do you build out an organization internally. We talk about a leverage a lot. And so, I've tried to build out a pretty deliberate management stack internally of like, how do we stay lean, but also like have some level of like hierarchy so that decisions can get made. There can be DRIs, there can be stakeholders, all of those other things that you need at a company, while also simultaneously avoiding a lot of the bloat that comes with, growing really, really quickly or anything else like that. So we've done a little bit of organizational kind of like operating, right? Like the org is still mostly flat and we have 28 people, right? So I essentially have like 25 people reporting to me, right? And so that's, probably a bad idea over time. And so we're kind of like lowering the kind of like managerial burden on that as we kind of like flush it out. But it also makes, it's really, really important to have operators be also managers, right? Like the worst thing that can happen is you hire a career manager who can't execute on the tasks at hand. Shit hits the fan. They can't actually kind of like step in or anything else like that to aid or help. And it makes the organization feel very, very fragile or helpless over time, right? And also from talking with a lot of people, like I was at Uber, post Travis, post, anything. A lot of the experiences that I have from chatting with people, they were saying like, oh yeah, we like grew really, really quickly. Like there was a year where I think they 4x headcount or something like that. It was insane, right? And so the cultural shear that actually happened over that period of time was kind of nuts, right? And they're like, yeah, it wasn't like the same company. I was like, yeah, like kind of no shit because, 80% of the people after 1 year are new, right? And so when you think about that from like a cultural perspective, it's like, how could they possibly understand the modus operandi of that company, right? So yeah, I think that we've tried to innovate a little bit on the organizational structure to try and grow, our gold standard is we want to grow 5x year over year, 1.5x headcount.
Oh, grow the business revenue 5x.
Yeah. Metrics in general, right?
Metrics. Okay.
Yeah. So like acquisition, top of funnel margins, stuff like that, right?
And you said you grew 5x in the last 6 months or something, right? I think you slipped that out earlier. So you guys are ahead of plan.
Yeah. Well, so ahead on that one. And then, revenue's in a really, really solid spot. We'll have doubled since the start of the year, which is great. So things are going, I would say quite well.
Nice. What's like current state of the business you're like allowed or open to sharing publicly with people?
We're like in the tens of mil from like a revenue perspective.
So somewhere between 10 and 99.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So, like wide range. Right. So that, and then we're like 28 people staying super lean. We've raised some money. The last announced round that we did was like a Series A in like 22 or something, but we raised an uncapped safe about a year ago.
Oh, interesting. What was the thinking on doing that?
We didn't want to take any more money, but people wanted to deploy capital. So it was like, well, the only way we're going to do it is on an uncapped safe. And they're like, all right, sure.
Wow. How do you think about that as a founder then? Like, do you think I should probably try to convert this for them at some point? Or is it like...
It's an investor we really, really like working with. So we will definitely be converting it at not egregious, like we really like working together in general, right? So our philosophy is like they wanted to put in more capital, and we really, really like working with them, right? So this allows us to kind of like continue to push the business into like a really, really awesome spot as we continue to look for a potential excellent, additional board partner for that,
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing too about not getting your valuation too extended from a standpoint of also recruiting. Like let's say the business is valued on paper at 50 million and 500 million, right? I have no idea how close any of this is to like the actual numbers, but like if you're trying to recruit someone and you say, hey, you're getting your options or your RSUs at 500 million versus 50, you've taken out 10x upside from them and the interest in joining, like the opportunity that they get from joining. So, you want to balance that. You don't want to like dilute yourself too much. You want to, maybe make existing investors feel like they're making money. And so like, it's like that balance of like not getting too far ahead.
Yeah, 100%. Right. You also want to be able to like reprice equity at some point to show it's like, oh, it's not just like mystery money or whatever, right?
It's not like is there valuation or monopoly money if you're
exactly,
playing.
Right. And so there's actually a whole kind of like mechanics surrounding this and like what is the optimal, right? Like even from like a employee stock option pool, when you grow it, when you not grow it, like when you raise money, when you not raise money, all those other things, right? So yeah, so that's where we're at right now.
And talking to people just kind of before we did this, a couple of people said you have a philosophy around just hiring really opinionated, talented people and maybe like not specifically telling them what to do, but just kind of like unleashing them and like just seeing what happens and like trying to guide it, I guess. I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but yeah. So what's the philosophy there?
The philosophy is that nobody joins a startup to be told what to do. They join a startup to work on hard problems and to go out and push themselves to like execute on hard problems. So from that kind of like standpoint, we're really looking for people who are like hyper autonomous, right? So we try and say, hey, we'll give you kind of like a structured onboarding. It's like 6 weeks of like, here's how we're going to ramp you from having zero context about how the business works or anything else like that. I mean, maybe not zero because you have some of it from external or whatever, but like our operating procedure, we've written a little bit about it, but it's like very, very different when you like come and join the organization, right? So from nothing to, I want you to do things that are like very, very important for the business, right? Like go in and start and figure out how are we going to do networking? Go in and figure out, maybe data center procurement. Go in and like, how can we rapidly get you to a point where you are building real things that you are really, truly interested in? Because I believe that we're going to, get the best out of people when they're really, really interested in building something, right? So I try to ask them, what thing are you interested in? How can we set you up for that immediately, right? And we're going to go and ladder your onboarding experience to get you to that point where you're going and making decisions, right? And so this can be actually very uncomfortable for some people who have like operated a company where, they have a manager and the manager like tells them what to go in and do, right? And so we've kind of like structured the process where you have 2 weeks of tasks, really straightforward stuff of like, go and make this change in the code base. This thing is evidently broken. Here's sort of where it is, right? And we do 2 weeks of problems, which is we have this problem, how are you going to go in and solve it, right? You'll have to put together like a little document. It's called an RFC. You just basically say, here's the problem. Here's requirements for the problem. Here's my suggested solution. Here's some other stuff that I've got. And then the team will kind of like rally around and say, okay, like maybe this, or these things. And then, they'll move through that. And then the last 2 weeks is what we call opportunities, which is, what do you think the company needs? Right. So within 1 month, right, we've basically stopped telling you what to go in and do.
So this is your 6-month onboarding process.
6 weeks.
Sure, yeah, 6-week onboarding process.
Yes.
It's specific tasks for the first 2. It's problem, like figure out how to solve this problem.
Here's a problem. The problem is evident and we've written it down and we need you to solve it. There's varieties of different ways you could solve it as like a solution, et cetera, right?
It would just be like, we need to grow, or like we need to set up a data center, or we need like, it's just like,
yeah, things like our observability, product sucks. Like how do we fix it, right? Like these things, right? And so they're nebulous, right? Because that's what you want early stages. You want people who are going to basically take these like nebulous things and convert them to like tractable outcomes, right? And that's like what we're aiming to like, not like test for, but like ladder you up and basically say, hey, here's how you should be thinking about a lot of these things. Like we are trying to move the business forward in either solving immediate problems or identifying opportunities that are going to allow us to grow really, really rapidly over time, right? So getting you to that point of like making those decisions and like identifying them and making mistakes and all those other things is like something that we like try and teach people in general so that they can operate completely autonomously, right? Because otherwise it's just, the company is a series of, executives ranging from like managers to like board people, like telling people what problems to like things to do, right? And again, I think the most awesome people, that's not really how they want to like live their life in general. They don't want to just like be told exactly what to go in and do. They actually want to go in and unleash themselves on where could I have the most impact, right? Like people are looking for like impact in general, right? So we can kind of almost be a conduit for that and saying, okay, here's how you can actually ladder up to having really, really awesome impact on the organization, shipping all the stuff that you've ever wanted to go, building out the thing, whether it's like your sales process or your go-to-market or product or design or anything else like that. It is a blank canvas for you to go in and push forward.
So it's like more help, like making an environment where people solve problems versus complete tasks.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Right. And so that's part of the whole like operating autonomously thing, right? And that's the thing that we really, really try and hammer home because, we're again trying to innovate on some of the org structures of basically saying like, how do you keep a company lean, right? And if you have people that you're consistently like being like, hey, how's that TPS report or whatever, right? Like you need managers and people to like close these loops, and then the people are kind of like pulling away because it's not that interesting or anything else like that. Like part of the reason to start Railway is like it is a ocean of interesting problems, right? To other businesses, but there's some businesses that are actually like deeply boring, right? And I would far rather work on those interesting problems as an engineer or, in my, spare time as like trying to design things or anything else like that. Like those are the things that like will keep my brain occupied. And so that's the space that we want to kind of like cultivate for people to come along and say, oh, that's really, really cool. I'd love to solve this thing or build this or do this thing, right? Whether it's networking, product, go to market, anything, support, stuff like that.
So how would you gauge like something's a worthwhile problem to solve? Like when you're going through this, like we need to solve this problem, but not that problem. Like how do you figure out what's the intensity or severity or like mission criticalness and crucial to solve of a problem versus not?
So we have a planning process, and we're switching essentially. We went from projects previously, where we just like put up a bunch of projects and we're like, okay, roughly these will like solve these problems and we can go execute on them, shoot problems, right? And as part of that planning process, what we do is we have essentially like co-signers, right? So you'll see a problem or you'll see a project previously, and you'll go ahead and you'll put your name down beside it, right? And then we will essentially stack rank and prioritize all of these things, and we will go together. And for that 1 week that we're actually going to go on plan, we're going to get consensus on which problems are really, really important. What's the stack rank of these problems? Who roughly might be a good fit to like go in and solve these things, and how many do we think we can actually accomplish, right? And that kind of just like provides a list from like tip to tail. Let's start on these things. Let's go down the list and like just essentially see how far we can get on those problems, right?
So you kind of have like, it's like a product roadmap, it's like a problem roadmap,
kind of, right? But it's also kind of like fueled by, hey, we want to go in and do these things from a product perspective, right? So if this is the vision, I issue this thing what I call like internally called guidance, which is, it's like public companies issue guidance, especially on financials and whatever, right? But I issue it from like a product perspective of like, this is what we want to go in and build, right? And so if we have this expected state that we want to go in and get to, and we have our current state, like the problem is that this shit doesn't deploy fast enough, or, all of those other kind of like problems that are along with it, right? And so you can almost like quantify those like either problems or opportunities as like, we want to be here and we're here. And so for us to be here, we have to solve these problems, right?
Do you feel like there's anything that people miss there? Like, or just generally in culture setting, like a lot of founders or startups get wrong?
I mean, my hot take is like, I don't think you set your own culture. I think at best, you as a founder get to steer it and you get to clarify it, right? So you essentially say, you're going to hire some people, and at some point you're going to look up and you're going to realize that the people that you've hired mostly all actually have the same rough-ish kind of like core, right? And that's kind of your culture, right? And if you can figure out how to like write down what those things are that make you and that make people, like people who work at Railway, like really, really successful or like enjoy the work that they go and do, et cetera, like that thing is your culture, right? And you as the founder are kind of like the steward for your own culture, right? And so it's your job to identify it. It's your job to like be really, really clear about it. It's your job to like, whenever you go and chat with candidates, to say, hey, this is what we are. And the entire subset of everything else is a thing that we are not, right? It's really, really important to quantify what you are and what you aren't, right? So that people have a really, really good shot. And I think this is a thing that I messed up really, really early, was that I wasn't as clear or deliberate about these things, about like what made us, right? Two candidates, right? And as a result, we hired people and we had to let them go at some point, right? And it was, through no fault of their own. It was, we were not clear about this is our culture and this is how we operate and all these other things. And so as a result, I've like continued to issue blog post after blog post of like, here's how we work. Here's how we think about problems. Here's how we operate, right? Like, jumping on a podcast, talking about like how we're trying to like innovate and build on the org structure to say, if you believe in these things and the same things that we believe, that like infrastructure is stuck in the like Stone Ages, and you can build beautiful design for this, and this lost art of kernel and data center and all these other things, and organizations should be filled with people who solve problems and identify opportunities instead of like receive tasks, then like you may be a fit for Railway. Come on down.
Small plug.
You've got to do that kind of like work to quantify what that culture is, right? And so for us, it's like we have 4 things. We have honorable, accelerating, reliable, and direct.
Say those again.
Honorable, accelerating, reliable, and direct. Spells hard, and it helps you solve hard problems, right? And so whenever you're trying to decide, do I ship this thing today or do I ship this thing tomorrow? You should be accelerating. Do I tell this person this feedback? I should be direct, right? Do I show up for this thing? Am I present? Am I putting myself in a situation where I'm, on call, but actually I've just like left my laptop at home? I'd rather be reliable, right? And then honor does a lot of like nebulous capturing of like, well, what is honorable, right? Like try and figure it out generally, right? So
that's kind of a cool. Did you come up with it, or like was it like a team effort of like, let's figure out some kind of like, fortune cookie type like, acronym thing?
So I came up with it because I think most values are bullshit and people go and they put them up there, and it's like, what do these things mean, right? Like at most companies, it's like, ask any employee the values, right? And
integrity,
some shit like that, right? It's like transparency or anything. Like, and sure, maybe those are like good things, right? But I really, really wanted the values to have like deep value for people, to like help them navigate those things, right? Like, I don't know if it's a value or if it's a concept or like whatever, but like Uber has this thing of like called toe stepping, right? It was like basically like,
like
right,
stepping on someone's toes.
yeah, right. And it was like a value that they had, right? They were like, right,
Do or don't do it.
do it,
Wow.
do the toe stepping thing, right? I was like, what the fuck? Like that's kind of rude.
It's a bad value,
Right? It's like, etc. But then I realized that like values for lots of people are actually almost like a lens through which you can navigate the culture a bit. Right. And so you can think about it. Right. And so if you think about Facebook's most like famous kind of value of like move fast and break things,
Yeah.
it admonished anybody of any sort of almost like wrath that they would incur because they had broken something, because they could point to the culture and they could say, but we move fast and we break things. That's what makes us Facebook. Right. Like, and so if you have this kind of like shared tendency that you can kind of all rally around, you can say, well, so-and-so wasn't a fit because they weren't moving fast and they weren't breaking things, right? And then you layer that with multiple values tenets there over time. And then you kind of figure out what is you, right? Like what makes you as part of like the company and like the people that you kind of bring on and the people that you attract and all those other things, right? And so you're almost like cooking this like cultural concentrate,
Mm-hmm. So how would you intentionally set that out? Because it sounds like you messed it up a little bit, or you didn't quite stick it and land it in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it sounds like maybe most people see it as just like, what are our values? Like, transparency, integrity. Maybe it's like how do you get like the thing that actually is tangible and moves the needle, and then like not make the same mistake you did?
No, man, I wish I could tell you, other than like, you just have to like trial and error it almost, right? And be really, really aware of like, what do you want to, I don't know, give people as a value?
Yeah,
right?
It seems like values is like the things that's like acceptable that the company leans into as being its thing.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah.
So
I think it's like, it's a compass for like, how are you going to like operate as a company, right? That's the way that I've looked at values in general. But again, I think it's one of those things where you don't really set it. You hire some amount of people, and at some point you realize that like that's your shared common kind of like denominator,
Yeah. Angelo on your team mentioned that you kind of like wrote your way or tweeted your way into being a founder. Like what does that mean?
Yeah. So I think it's a lot of that kind of build in public kind of type thing, right? Where I'm writing, blog posts about like, the inward draw of capitalism or whatever, right? Just like putting out things and feelers and all of those other things. You're almost like, I think it's Naval or whatever, that's like, you got to create the surface area for luck or whatever to like.
It sounds like a Naval quote.
Yeah, right. Or something like that, right? So it was a lot of basically just, how do I put myself in the arena to like go in and try and like catch some of this luck in general, right? And for me, it was more just like I think that anything that stands has to stand to public scrutiny or it doesn't stand at all, right? And so if you put yourself in that arena and you start going and putting those things out there, you're going to figure out really, really quickly, like whether you are correct or not on a lot of these things, because in a public forum, like especially on the internet or whatever, people are not shy to call you out on a lot of this stuff, right?
Got an anonymous account has nothing to lose. It's you're an idiot.
Some person with an anime avatar and 6, followers can ruin your entire week, like it just, yeah.
And so you wrote a post it was in May of 2021. I think you actually referred to it earlier. It was called How We Work. I think it was like How We Work at Railway. Maybe it was just How We Work.
Yep.
What was the post? What was like the general kind of framing and how do you work at Railway?
Yeah. So this is like the first version of that blog post of like, oh no, like, we've messed up hiring and we had to like let go of somebody, and like we need to figure out a way to like not do that, because like, these are real people's lives, of course, right? Like, so you don't want to do that, right? So I wrote a post called like How We Work. We're a remote company, so we work with people, like Dubai, Japan, Spain, Thailand, Montreal, every time zone is hit. Australia, right? Like, so we have to work in a different way. And this is kind of like part of we're innovating a little bit on the org structure, because I think that that's really, really interesting. One of our investors pointed out, he's like, not really a lot of like big remote companies, right?
Yeah, maybe
like
GitLab is the biggest.
Yeah, GitLab is kind of the like one exception in general to like that rule. But generally there isn't, right? And we had a conversation about why that is in general, right? And there's a few kind of nuggets of basically like the standard org structure doesn't work as well from that perspective.
You're saying like the management, like MBA type org structure thinking?
Yes, right? And the like short reason for this is actually like if somebody tells you something that you don't like in an office or whatever, you still have to kind of show up to the office generally, right? Like you have to kind of work, etc., right? You continue to have to like show up to this job, right? If you're doing things that like people don't like in general as a remote work employee, what do? You close the fucking laptop, you go outside, right? You just like basically you can quiet quit or you can whatever, right? And so essentially from an org design perspective, you have to design an org which is interesting enough for people to say, oh yeah, like actually the reason I'm signing on, the reason I'm doing like all of these things is actually because I'm really, really, really interested in the work, right? And so we had to kind of change a few of the like structurings in that, right? But the how we work blog post is the first pass, the very elementary kind of like stuff of like, this is how we work differently than most companies to combat that problem, to make sure that people can kind of like continue to ship a lot of the things that they want to go, to attract talent that can work on really, really hard problems, to make sure that we like don't have to get into that situation of like, hey, you have that TPS report in general, and the person says, yeah, like great, and then close the laptop and like goes, right? So
anything we talk a little bit about like how you've changed like cadence, team design, org structure related to how you work. Are there anything else you probably want to say related to how you work you haven't kind of hit on yet that kind of makes the structure of the team and the company a little bit unique?
There's a bunch of different things, but I would recommend just like in the interest of time, like have a look at those like 4 blog posts that we have in terms of how we work.
Okay. We'll throw a link in the description of the show. We'll get all the links and throw them down there for people. And it feels like my general takeaway was minimize meta work and maximize real work. I think that seemed to be like succinctly, that's kind of what you're trying to do.
Yep.
It's like a productivity, like get stuff done.
Yep.
And specifically in a remote setting, you could create a lot of meta, like you can always create a lot of meta work, like work to get work done. And you're like trying to remove as much of this, like the work that isn't actually real work and it's like adjacent work. You try to minimize how often that happens.
Yeah, we try and do that, right? So we like do meetings on like Mondays and Fridays, right? Because meetings are the number one kind of like, contributor to a lot of that meta work, right? It's like, oh, how do we solve this problem? It's like, well, let's have a meeting about this problem. It's like, you don't solve the problem in the meeting. Even if you have a meeting to solve the problem, you don't actually solve the problem in the meeting because you didn't ratify that decision by pulling it out somewhere where everybody could like have a look at it and it would stand to scrutiny, et cetera. Like, I don't know why, I assume, Jeff Bezos has, memos because it concretifies those things. It's that whole thing about like clean memo, like messy meeting or whatever, right? But you really, really need to be concrete in the writing so that, again, it stands to scrutiny, right? There's that whole point about like PowerPoints is like allows you kind of like smear logic through the thing.
If you write it,
it has to stand to scrutiny, right? And so, we try and minimize the amount of like meta work. And it's like, okay, put it together, identify the problem, identify the requirements, be very, very clear about it. Okay, cool. That's awesome, right? Let's go and let's move on that thing, right? And it sounds like a lot of work, but like once you get actually like reasonably good at the muscle, you can crank out these like RFCs in like 5 minutes to do a really, really complicated thing, right? Like, yeah, I wrote one, I don't know, this week about like some sort of, like database hardware offloading that we're going to go in and do to make like provisioning databases like way quicker and like actually like database latency for writes, right? Put it out in like 5 minutes, had some comments on it. People were like, what about this thing, et cetera. I got alignment. I covered like somebody else pointed out a thing that I completely missed. I was like, oh crap, like let's go and fix that. And then I was like, cool, way to the races, right? All that happened. Guy in London, just I saw it randomly and was like, boom, okay, cool. And then I've like worked on it and I'm going to go home after this podcast. So I'm going to go and finish it up.
There you go. And is this all happening on Discord? You guys run the company on Discord, which is not what you normally hear.
No. Most people like run it on Slack. And the reason we run it on Discord is drop-in communication, right? So remote companies don't have that like office culture, like serendipity, et cetera, which is like actually deeply valuable. Like you want to actually be close to your coworkers in general. And so, yes, you can spin up like a huddle in Slack, but like Discord has this really, really cool feature where you can see everybody kind of like in the kind of meeting rooms right at the top, right?
Yeah, that's true. There's different like audio chats or I guess video. You can like see who's in them.
You can see it's like the Michael Bloomberg Glassdoor meeting room policy for the Internet of Things or whatever. Not the Internet of Things, but like the internet or whatever. So that's kind of why we do that in general. And it's worked quite well for a lot of things. And then there's like some things that we have to like build Slack bridge extensions for.
Yo, is there any like, Discord is made for gaming, not running a business organization?
It's funny. We're like trying to make like a really concrete, like, decision of the company. And then you get like a Fortnite ad at the bottom of it. You're like, okay, it's awesome.
Do you wish that more people, more like founders and organizations talk publicly about how they do the kind of team and structure things?
Yeah, 100%. I think how you construct a company's org structure is like, one, hasn't been changed in a while, and two, actually is like one of the number one complaints that I hear from employees who have gone through like hypergrowth periods, right? I have friends at various different companies where they're like, man, we grew really fast and like our management stack really sucks. Like, we are not setting up our managers for success. We are not setting up people to kind of like scale into these roles. Like, there's no like almost like JD of like, what does a manager do, right? It's like, how do you give these people really, really awesome tools to be able to innovate on this thing that is like very, very standard MBA kind of, et cetera, business stuff. So I would love if people like wrote on a lot of these things. I don't think a lot of people are doing that in general, not even just like the writing thing. I don't even think they're just like innovating on it. It's like the standard kind of like a manager's path, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like having a that's probably the closest like rubric for concrete manager kind of operationalizing. But I think that there is arb in changing a few things there, right? Especially when you run a remote team, and I can run one-on-ones at weird different hours, right? I can go out in the middle of the day, have a run, go have, lunch or something like that, brunch with a friend or something, and then come back and kind of like have a meeting at, I don't know, 8 o'clock or 11 or something.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about, do you see the issues with these hypergrowth startups that don't do org design or team design correctly? What's like the mistake that seems to be made?
It just seems like almost just like a lack of concrete, like, operationalizing of like, what do managers do at those companies, right? Like, what is a manager supposed to be responsible for? How can they, encourage the success of their employees? Like, just a very, very concrete example, like, do they or do they not write code, right? Like, that's a thing that like is like some companies like have management stacks where they simply don't even write that, and it's like a completely different experience across different culture or different teams on that culture, right? And so you have this like almost shearing or different ways of operating, which there's not like a standard on that, right? Other than like industry standard, et cetera.
What's like the most interesting operating procedure policy that you've seen, even if you don't use it at Railway, but it's like the thing that pops the most is like, that's a very opinionated way of doing something.
I mean, the one that I like is the like clean memo, messy meeting or one from like Amazon. That one kind of just like makes sense. We try and like write memos generally for meetings, but it doesn't happen every single time, obviously. What other things are really, really solid operating procedure? I like a lot of the Netflix stuff. If you've read the like No Rules book, there's a lot of like really, really solid stuff in there.
I don't think I have. What's an example from that?
Well, a lot of it is kind of on just like giving people as much, slack or whatever as possible, like a ton of different freedom, right? Like there's an example from that book where it's like, well, who approves my marketing expenses? And it's like, you don't. You have a credit card and you go run the marketing expenses. And if you need to write a PO for any of these things, like go and do it, right? And they're like, well, what's the like budget? What's all these other things, right? And it's like, make good decisions that are in the good or the interest of the company and go in and execute on those decisions. And if it's great, that's awesome. And if it's bad, like tell us why it was bad, right? And it's like a lot of kind of like freedom stuff like that,
Interesting. You feel like it's maybe too much like a daycare versus like a science experiment.
Your words, not mine.
Okay, yeah, well, that's fair. I'm happy to take the brunt on that one. So when it comes to having a remote team, lots of different time zones, lots for people doing different things, different procedures, or different work modes, different like cultures around the world. One thing I know you have a really strong opinion on is not working on the weekends. So why do you think that?
Yeah, so I got lambasted on Twitter the other day for this one where I said, I forget what the actual quote was. I think it was, my hot take is that you should not be working weekends. And if you end up working weekends, you suck at planning, right? And so I personally try to both champion the idea that you should be on when you're on, and you should be off when you're on.
Off when you're off.
When you're off, when you're off. Yeah, sorry. And the reason for this is horsepower gets you a lot of the way. But at a certain point, you need to refine your technique, right? And if you figure out that you're working all the time, you don't really have a space to kind of like decompress, figure out where you kind of like essentially lost time. If you think about it in terms of like almost like a slalom skiing thing, right? Like I had this deadline and I was ahead of it. Why was I ahead of it, right? What decisions did I make that actually allowed me to kind of like move really, really quickly there? Or I had this deadline and I was behind it. Why? For what reason was I behind? Where could I have like bought back those seconds essentially, right? And if you are like always absolutely rip it and grip it and gunning it, it's all these things, and your default modus operandi is to simply double down and continue to work weekends, you're not going to be able to identify those areas in which you can actually get, outsized value returns on simply changing one small aspect of how you are operating so that you can get faster and faster and faster, right? It's kind of like, performance athletes or anything else like that, they'll push themselves a ton, and then they'll give themselves a little bit of space to kind of like cycle out, right? So
it's not like you don't work and you like close your laptop on Friday at 5 p.m. and you open it back up at 9 a.m. on Monday.
No, right? Like it's if I do my job perfectly, correctly, 100% of the time, which I never ever do because I'm human or whatever, right? I will not work any weekends and I will not get paid when I'm on vacation. That doesn't happen. I worked the last like 6 weekends, right? Like getting like a bunch of these things. But as a result of working those last 6 weekends, I've kind of like put things into a spot where I can say, this is the reason I've been working the last 6 weekends, right? This class of work, we probably actually didn't even need to like go it down and do. We were just doing it because, either org planning or, we reactionary or anything else like that. So I can go back through there and kind of audit my time and say, where could we buy back 20% of our cycles? Where could we go in and do that, right? And then we go in and write it down, right? And creating that space to be able to go and do that almost like time audit, decompression, et cetera, is really, really key for figuring out ways that you can actually go really, really quickly again, right? It's like you build the race car, you run the race car, you figure out where it rattles, you bring it into the pit lane, and then you go and you tune it again, and then you run the race car.
So it's almost like you almost like try to be a weekend warrior. Like you live for the weekend because you make your week so efficient and so good that you can take the weekend off, even if you don't actually necessarily get to do that a lot. But that's what you strive for.
That's exactly the goal, right? And because like my brain will naturally just like get pulled back towards work anyways, right? But it's different kinds of work, right? It's work that's not like doing, right? It's work that's like thinking, right? So I pull myself away from the keyboard. Maybe I'll take my journal. I'll go to the park or the sauna or something like that. It's still thinking about work, but it's almost like the technique of like, how could I have improved on this thing? How could I have whatever, right? So that's kind of why I think that like you should delineate these like concrete lines, right? To say, okay, I'm going to go hard on all like Monday to Friday, I'm going to go hard, right? Like I'm probably working until like, 11, 12, sometimes 1 a.m., right? And then I'm up at like 8 a.m., right? I'm going to go hard during the week. And then buzzer stops, weekend, etc. If I have stuff that I have to do because I'm getting pulled in, maybe I'm, on call or anything else like that, obviously I have to go in and do it, right? But I should strive to basically try and disconnect as much as possible and figure out why I'm getting pulled back into these things, where I lost time or anything else like that so that I can improve myself over time.
Do you feel like sort of like the culture of Silicon Valley has seeped into that being a necessary thing? Like you must work weekends, maybe not Silicon Valley, just like business in general.
I think marketing is like truly underrated. It's a skill that if you're really, really good at marketing, you can fuck up almost everything else, right? And so I think that marketing has only even got more and more important, right? And so there's a lot of almost almost gratuitous like grind culture of like, I'm just going to like grind a ton on this stuff. And, because you're putting out that content, like those are things that people are generally seeing, they're amping it, et cetera, right? So I think it's changed a little bit in terms of people are doing things for almost like visual optics reasons in some ways versus what can we do that's actually like highly impactful or stuff like that, right? So I think that that's kind of more where it's kind of like gravitated towards. And as a result, you see a lot of like really just like absolute grind culture or, really flashy kind of like, things that you're like, what is this, right? Like what product are you actually selling? What thing are you actually solving? Stuff like that, right?
So one actual question we should probably talk this a long time ago, but Erica at Redpoint was like, oh, make sure you ask this. So you probably could have taken a really big concentrated bet on AI models at some point. And I don't think you have. What was the thinking on that?
So I'm a big fan of Jim Collins. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Yeah, Good to Great, Great by Choice. What was the other one?
Yep. I don't know. Just the one I think of mostly is Good to Great, right? And it has this principle in it called the hedgehog principle. And so essentially like, what is the surface area of things that you can be like basically top 3 in the world, I think it is. And if you can't do that and you can't operate on those things, like you probably shouldn't move into that adjacency zone just yet, right? And so there's a shitload of competition in terms of like doing, the model hosting, et cetera, right? And so from this point, right, like I don't think that we can be, we could if we invested all of our eggs in that basket, but I don't think we can be top, 3 to 5 in the world while also doing all of the things that we want to go in and do. So it's almost a concerted effort to say, that's really, really cool, but we have to say no to this at this time, right? We have to exercise a lot of focus to basically say, like, we're going to execute on the things that we are really, really set up for, can really, really do excellently well. Let's go in and push on those. And then once we get to the point where we are dominating those things in that field, what can we expand to, right? And then figure out, okay, cool. When we can do compute and data centers and, orchestration and everything else like that so well that we're literally top in the world, right? And we're pushing towards that as of right now. I think in a really good spot. Maybe we can do that for GPUs, right? And maybe we can slice and dice GPUs, and maybe we can give you timeshare on a kind of like basis of, oh, cool, I really want it just this slice of a GPU for this period of time, right? And that may or may not be a thing that we'll do in the future,
This is like maybe like a roadmap sneak peek, but maybe not.
Maybe not, right? It's like at some point that will probably be a thing that like is worth doing, right?
Okay, that's fair.
This is not like a one drop, like next week we're doing GPUs or something else like that,
Yeah. So you mentioned Good to Great by Jim Collins. Do you have any just like favorite historical businesses or CEOs or founders that you've kind of gotten a lot of inspiration from? And it could be recent, ancient times, anything that anyone you've really drawn a lot of inspiration from?
I don't really have like founders or whatever. It's not like, like Steve Jobs is great. It's like a good person to look up for a variety of reasons. For some other reasons, not so great. It's kind of like rude or whatever. I don't necessarily have like a specific person where I'm like, oh my God, this is like my idol or whatever. I like take various different things from people and try and like personify them, right? One example is like, and not even really a founder. There's this YouTube video of Jonah Hill talking about why Marty Scorsese is like such an excellent director. I swear I'm going somewhere with this. And he's talking about it, and he's basically saying like, imagine yourself doing, as an experienced chess player with a infinite amount of time, right? And you make a move and, you keep going or whatever, right? They are really, really good because given a super, super small subset of time, they're going to make a better move quicker, right? And so those are kind of things that I like go in and say, I'm like, okay, why is that person excellent? Why are they truly, truly good at their craft? And what makes them so? And is there a way that I can go and take that kind of like skill and get really, really good at, right? So I try and make decisions like really, really quickly and intelligently now, because I believe that like that is one part of like being excellent, right? So that's just kind of one example, but I take pieces from various different things where I kind of see them,
So you try to find like who or what is really good at specific things and seeing what you can learn from them.
Yep.
Anything recent you've learned from that?
The one that kind of comes to mind is like, it's like Mark Zuckerberg. And it's not really like a thing, but like, I think Mark has like really, really, really good patience and really, really good identification of like things that are important, right? And so they are very happy to go in and work on the hard problem like VR, because they know like they're going to shell a ton of money into that thing, because they know at some point VR is going to be really, really, really important, right? So they have the patience to go and wait out for like a ton of time so that they can potentially be first in this market and just kind of like play around, right? So that's kind of like one example of a thing that I've been like, I don't know if I learned it recently, but I developed a deep kind of like appreciation for how good I believe that they are at this thing, right? It's like waiting for the right time and then acting and then being in a really, really good spot, you know?
Yeah, it makes sense with kind of thinking about maybe the railway product roadmap, where you like roll things out, where you've thought about what you offer, where you compete.
Just be really, really deliberate about that stuff. Wait for users to really tell you exactly what they want out of something, right? Because if somebody says like, oh, I want this specific integration, and you're like, all right, well, tell me why, or like what problem or anything else like that, falls a bit flat, right? But then when a user like begs you for like, oh my God, I need better observability. I can't like tell any of this, like, I don't want to use, this specific thing anymore, right? Like these are all the problems I need to solve, right? I need to be able to be notified when, my apps crash, or I need to be able to like know when like latency spikes or anything else like that. Like you're starting to get really, really concrete information because you've said no to this person a lot, like, and these people in general for a long while. You're accumulating a lot of this information so that when you actually go and the time is right to go and act on that, you have a litany of feedback that you can actually go in and be like, okay, cool. Like these are all the things that we should go and execute on. These are the problems. These are the things that we're going to like actually try and really push the envelope on, right? Your plan is really, really concrete instead of this almost like frenetic, like reactionary thing of like, oh, they want this, so I'm going to go and build this thing, right?
I feel like that's a good sort of way to end it, with the way like it's almost like the whole railway like the experiment of building this company has been like a very intentional wait for the right moments to do things. Even thinking about like how you've incorporated certain products and features is like make sure you take a feedback and know when you're acting, like you act from a position of strength almost. Yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. This is excellent. This is a ton of fun.
Where can if somebody's like, man, this Jake guy is like, he seems like a sharp guy. We mentioned your tweet, so can we find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it nowadays. It's just Jake, so JUST and then Jake. You can follow me to varying levels of, I don't know, interest or whatever. I'm sorry, or you're welcome, depending on how you read the tweets or whatever. So, yeah.
And then do you write on Substack still? I didn't actually look at the dates on your posts.
I haven't written in a while. It's mostly kind of like, actually, I might have written something a little while ago. It's very kind of inconsistent. It's whenever the kind of like need strikes to like get something out there in general, right?
You mentioned the domain, your $1 million domain, railway.com is where you can find
us at railway.com.
Cool. Well, yeah, we'll throw links to a bunch of stuff we talked about in the description, and people can dig in a little bit more if they want to. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for doing it.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. And thanks to Ramp for supporting this episode. Upgrade your corporate card and get $250 at ramp.com/thepeel. If you missed it, check out last week's episode with Matt Mullenweg at Automatic on how WordPress grew to power over 43% of all websites on the internet. And the week before that with Grant Lee on how Gamma grew to over 50 million in ARR with only 30 employees. Tune in next week for Garrett Lord, the founder of Handshake, whose college recruiting platform has emerged as a leader filling the massive opportunity in the AI data labeling space. If you like this conversation, please comment, like, subscribe, and name your next AI model after me. And if you don't want to miss a future episode, subscribe to my newsletter, The Split, linked in the description, to get each episode plus a transcript emailed directly to your inbox every week. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.